To order this town council meeting at 7 p.m. Everyone could please rise for the pledge of allegiance, followed by a
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have proclamations and presentations. So we do have one recognizing Earth Day, which was last Friday. So get that read into the record. So whereas on April 22nd, 1970, millions of Americans came together to celebrate the first Earth Day. Residents from all walks of life encouraged people across the United States to address environmental issues and rallied around a single message. The success of future generations depends on how we act today and every day. And whereas we commemorate Earth Day this year, we reflect on the challenges that we continue to face both locally and globally, and face those challenges with the spirit of togetherness and shared responsibility. And whereas Tolland has made various efforts towards addressing environmental issues, for many decades, numerous trails throughout the community of Tolland have been established, fostering a spirit of stewardship and environmental awareness. Tolland has also welcomed alternative energy resources, including a solar farm, encouraging residential solar opportunities, and the community has approved investments in geothermal and government buildings. And whereas while we have made great progress in protecting our open spaces and our natural resources, we know our work is not yet finished, and we must continue to revisit areas where we can expand our support for alternative energies, energy efficiencies, and maintain the quality of our natural open spaces. Now, therefore, I, Steve Jones, Chair of the Tolland Town Council, on behalf of the Town Council and the community at large, recognize April 22nd as Earth Day and thank residents from across the community who took part in education, community cleanup opportunities, or engaged in personal activities to ensure Tolland's natural resources and public spaces will be preserved and thrive for future generations. Dated at Tolland, Connecticut, this 26th day of April 2022. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that on the screen. All right, so our next item of business is public petitions, communications, and public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Town Council with a 2-minute limit. If there's anyone online, you can hit the raise hand function or *9. Otherwise, if you're in the audience, you can approach the table and state your name and address. People in the room are here for another part of the meeting, so seeing no public participation, we'll kind of skip over item 6. There's no public hearing items. 7A, report of boards and committees responsible to council. We have 7A, which is a recommendation from the Tolland Mental Health and Substance Use Task Force. I believe we have some members of the task force with us tonight. So do you guys want to approach the table or?
Better so that the public can hear better.
Yeah.
Hello. So nice to see everybody in person.
Yeah.
So strange too. It's a little bit weird, but I was like, there's no way I want my big face on there. No, not doing it.
And if you could, for the record, introduce yourself just so that Lisa and the public.
Sure. So I am Becky Moore. I am the chair of the Mental Health and Substance Use Task Force, which was created by the Town Council, I think like over a year ago at this point. It was a year and a half ago. So we've been doing some work. We already approached with our first round of recommendations, which I know I've been following. You guys are looking at it through ARPA and everything. So we appreciate that follow through. It's great. So we're here for our next round of recommendations. So we've continued to do our due diligence. We've been interviewing relevant stakeholders. We've been looking at what's around. And the thing that we've now assessed is that there is an increased need for recreational activities in town, specifically for youth ages 10 to 18. Tolland has a lot of pay-to-play fabulous sport programs. You know, we have the soccer, we have the football, there's lacrosse, my kids participate, it's great. However, it really leaves out a subset of kids that maybe don't want to do athletics or have other interests, other strengths, or perhaps, you know, pay to play. It's not a cheap thing. So we recommend that the recreational activities in Tolland be broadened to include low cost, non-athletic programming that appeals to a wide array of youth. So to be clear, this isn't a rec center, more taking what we already have, building on it, seeing how we can use our resources wisely. Bruce has been fabulous. He does a great job. Bruce is one person though. He does what he can with what he has. And so this isn't saying that we're not doing a good job. We are, but it's not, there needs to be more Ray. Also, the library has been doing a lot of great things that I've recently seen in my emails, which I think is a great step in the right direction. So in addition to talking to stakeholders and, getting feedback from the public, looking at what surrounding towns do, there is a lot of research out there. COVID has had a huge impact on the social emotional well-being of kids through something that we call pro-social activities, which is also meaningful social interactions. And when COVID happened, a lot of those meaningful social interactions, they didn't exist anymore. You couldn't just go do this program, or you couldn't even go to the movies with friends. It's all virtual on Zoom. So there is a growing body of data that indicates that the youth experiencing mental health issues, that it's heavily impacted by this lack of social emotional connection in a healthy, constructive way. Even prior to COVID, this was one of the biggest things that in the social sciences, psychology, social work, these meaningful social interactions, there is tons of data that supports that when you have an opportunity for robust, meaningful social interactions, that's going to lead to, just a better overall sense of well-being, better mental health. And then, as we know, if our kids have better mental health, families are happy and thriving. It's a huge domino effect. So I just wanted to point that out, that there is also a lot of substantial research, peer-reviewed data that backs this type of thing. So in the past, it's been reported that programming offered was not attended well, that it's been out there, but nobody really went to it. So to further increase the engagement in programming, we're recommending to create a youth advisory board to give input on potential programming, and also a survey be given to the youth in town to see what programming they would like to see, how they would find out about it, what would they do, what is going to interest them. So I'm going to turn it over to Maureen. She's got a lot of great information about what surrounding towns do, so that way you guys have a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Maureen Flanagan. I'm the Assistant Director of Human Services for Tolland. I also wear the hat of the Youth Service Bureau person in town, and I am the staff liaison to the task force. So we did do some surveying of a variety of towns. As you all know, a town is impacted by the size, and so we can ask South Windsor what they do, but it's not exactly comparing like with like. So this is really just to give you an idea of some of the array of services offered in the different towns, but not by any means to make some suggestion that therefore Tolland ought to be able to emulate what some of the bigger towns are doing. Mansfield has the UConn campus right there. So they do an incredible amount of stuff with the UConn students, a lot of mentoring, buddy programs, reading programs. They have UConn students right in the high school, the middle school, the younger grades. They do a lot of mentoring type, sports-based mentoring programs. They do a lot of different camps, as we do here in Tolland, but they're just able to offer more arts camps, films camps, science and engineering, a youth gardening program. Vernon has a similar gardening program, arts camps, dance camps, science camps. South Windsor, similar. Coventry does a life skills training at the alternative high school. They do cooking classes. A couple of the youth service bureaus in this area they offer an outpatient mental health component. There is in Ellington programs offered to the youth for photography, yoga. They have movie nights, leadership programs, a lot, like I said, a lot of mentoring within the schools. That some of the older kids run some lunch programs for the younger kids, mother-daughter circles, book buddies. adventure-based program for students transitioning to high school, and finally some family hikes that are offered in towns in their different town parks.
Thank you. And then also in terms of the youth advisory board, Warren, we don't have a youth advisory board. We need to, but you're working on that. I know you said that you're.
It has-
trying to get one up
Yeah, just for your knowledge, that as a youth service bureau, we do have, part of our responsibility is to have a local prevention council / youth advisory board. And so as I understand it, it has taken various forms over the years. And in the last couple of years with COVID, it's just been really difficult to have that kind of youth engagement. So I am 100% committed to making that happen. And somehow to get a group of students together, high school students, middle school students, maybe to have quarterly meetings with the young people to say, not only what do you need, but how do we get the word out about what's offered? Because as was previously mentioned, sometimes we do have programs that are just not being utilized to their fullest extent. So, and to that end, I'd like that youth advisory panel to then be able to feed back to the local prevention council and indeed, the departments, the rec department, library, what the youth are telling us.
Okay, thank you. So that's our kind of recommendation about recreational stuff. So in addition to that, we also recommend that enough money be in the town and Board of Education budget to maintain the 2 courses of teen leadership and skills for adolescents. So we lumped these together because we kind of felt like they were on the similar rather than have 2 separate presentations to the council. So these are courses that are offered in the middle school and the high school. They cover a wide array of social emotional topics, and Dr. Willett gave us data from them, and they appear to have been well received by students. Students like them, they engage in them, which, as we've demonstrated, engaging is a huge piece of it to get the kids to engage. In addition, we have received a good amount of correspondence from the community advocating that these stay in the budget somewhere, somehow. They were previously grant funded. I believe, Jacob, the grant funding ran out this year.
Yeah,
Or
if I
ended.
can remember correctly, it did, and this would be the first year where it would be included in our general
Okay.
expenditures.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So that in addition is a recommendation that we have, given the fact that youth are already engaging this and requesting it, it seems, I mean, why wouldn't we keep that going? So all this being said, we know the budget is being voted on May 3rd. So we are not making a statement or a stance on the budget as a whole, but we are saying that, so if it isn't approved, the task force recommends that the town council and the Board of Ed take these recommendations into consideration. So that will be protecting the funding for an additional, the additional part-time recreation employee, because like we said, Bruce is fabulous and he's as much of a Superman as he can be, but you can only do so much as one person. And in order to expand and reimagine, you're gonna need another person. So we would ask that that be considered if this comes back to town council. Please take our recommendation into consideration. And then also for the Board of Ed to protect the funding for those teen leadership and skills for adolescent classes. So again, those are the 2 pieces of the budget that we do support, and without those, these recommendations will not be able to move forward in the way that we would like them to. Yeah, Jacob, do you have anything you want to add, or Maureen?
Yeah, I'll just say a quick thing.
Sure.
For the record, I'm one of the DOE reps for the task force and the secretary of the task force. I'll just say, I think the most important thing in this recommendation, in my opinion, is the youth advisory board component. I think that's what will make everything work well. Because if you're not creating programming that kids are interested in, then I mean, it's pretty much being set up for failure to begin with. I think that was the part that was most exciting to me, and I'm really looking forward to see what Ms. Flanagan does with that this year. I hope that everything can go forward as planned.
Thank you. You guys have any questions for us?
Yeah, so one quick question of the youth advisory board, just off the top of my head. So that would be within the function of the local prevention council group, or would it be something that might be separate? I'm just thinking as an example, the library that Becky brought up, the teen library council. Would it be a thought then to have a teen recreation, this youth advisory board function within maybe a subset of the recreation advisory board that's already in existence, or trying to create some sort of cohesion between the board of ed and that group? Is that maybe youth liaisons there to be engaged with Bruce, and if there's a program coordinator approved in you know, that they could interact that way?
I will respond. As the Youth Service Bureau person in Tolland, you know, we do get pretty good grant funding from the Department of Children and Families, and part of best practices and the expectation is that you're not, as the Youth Service Bureau, it's more than just tokenism. You don't want to just have kids sitting there at the meeting and, you know, agreeing with what all the adults in the room are talking about. And there's a whole body of expertise behind how do you engage youth in accomplishing this. And I've been to a number of trainings of late. So with all that in mind, I do have some plans as to how we can, in our new, hopefully post-COVID world, re-engage with the young people in town. And I'm more than happy to coordinate with Mr. Watts and Mr. Geary at the library to not duplicate efforts and to kind of piggyback off of each other about what we're learning from what the youth are telling us and what they need.
No, that's great. And regarding, would that also be coordinated maybe through the board of ed? Obviously, that probably your prime audience would be through the school systems. Would that be where it'd be executed, or would it be a general community survey through a town or office out to folks?
I think that warrants a lot more discussion. We don't necessarily, it doesn't need to be like, you know, like we're talking about a formal needs assessment and all that. It doesn't need to be that formal. I think we would have to discuss more how to best get youth to take it and take it somewhat seriously.
Yeah.
I think all of that would warrant further discussion for sure. And my hope would be that different, you know, the Board of Ed, town council, the schools, my hope would be that we can all just work together to get this information.
Okay. I guess then the last question, how do you find social media might play a role in trying to get that outreach to either a youth advisory board or to this survey function? Just anecdotally, I recall having a conversation with Andy about, you know, they share a lot of stuff on Facebook, but their target demographic isn't really on Facebook. It's gradually becoming an older, you know, 30, 40 plus audiences on Facebook, and they're on Instagram and TikTok. And, you know, I'm sure there's concerns about trying to expand government being on all these different social media. So do you end up having a point person or some mechanism to get it out there beyond like the digital backpack that's at the board event level or the e-blasts at the town level?
My experience has been, number one, you are correct. I'm told all the time that like nobody uses Facebook but older people. Right? Like it's just not a thing that kids use now. They use Instagram, TikTok, I don't know, Snapchat, things of that nature. So I think it's definitely a useful tool. You know, I'm seeing more and more Board of Educations and school systems having a TikTok. A lot of kids will be like, look at what my principal put on TikTok when I'm doing my work. And they think it's great. They really like it. So you would need somebody though to do that and to coordinate that. And you'd have to, you know, carefully select that person because it would have to be enough humor to engage them. But so I definitely think social media will play a huge role. As far as the digital backpack goes, it's a great resource. It's really, when it comes to this type of programming, especially for 10 to 18, it's going to have to be driven by the kids themselves. So they're going to have to see it and they're going to have to be like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that. And like their friends want to do it. And kids don't necessarily look at the digital backpack. That's more their parents. So, you know, it definitely would take some creativity, but I definitely think social media would be the way to go. And I'm sure we have the resources already existing to expand in that nature.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does, because I think that same anecdote about library programs or some other like recreation programs that get shared on Facebook.
Right.
It's the parents that see it.
Yep.
And it's usually 50-50 on whether or not the kids are like, yeah, I'll do it, or
Right.
all my parents suggested it. No way.
Yeah, yeah.
It can't be cool. They think I should do it.
If you can get like two friends to do it
Yeah.
together, then they're like, yeah, we'll do it because this person's doing it. But if I'm like to my son, like, do you want to go to Lego Club? He's like, no. And I'm like, really? Because you're playing with Legos right there. But okay. So you are very right that it has to be really, the parents are the ones that see Facebook.
It's more organic. It would be like in your instance, like if you said, oh, I heard,
Mm.
Johnny's mom talking and he's going, do you want to go hang out with him at the Lego thing? It's like, oh, that sounds like fun.
Much
Like,
different
if it-
scenario.
Yeah.
Perhaps Elon Musk will figure all
Yes.
this out.
Yeah.
for us with his purchase of Twitter.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Also, this evening I have Bruce Watt, in case you have any questions regarding the recreational facility or anything. He's online in case you need. him.
okay. And then I do want to make sure, as I know, I do see, I think Susan Salem and I think Carleen are both
Oh, there's-
members of the task force as well. So
Yeah.
just want to welcome them and thank them for being able to hop on tonight. But I'll open the floor to questions to other counselors. I see Counselor Lupa. Councilman Lupa, followed by Councilman Yudichak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I mean, I think that these are great recommendations. I think it's something that we do need this. We do need more youth interaction. Mr. Chair has taken most of my questions here, which is good because,
Great minds think alike.
yeah. But the one thing that I we don't need to solve it right now, but I think one of the things that needs to be examined is with this youth advisory board. I mean, back in the day, I was part of it for our town back in Buffalo in that area. And it was something that I thought was good because felt like it was input. But I think it's something that we need to actually, like, once we get it going, or once we establish it, there's got to be like a clear chain of command where they would be either underneath you, or they'd be underneath Bruce, or they'd be underneath somebody where they can participate. They can have one adult inside the room that will listen to them, but it'll be mainly student driven. And then they could take part and either report back, because they're not going to be able to implement anything on their own, but report back to the recreation committee, or report back to the library committee, or report back to somebody else, so that they can actually feel like there's input. Because the more that people, especially kids, feel that there's input and there's actually like people listening to them and taking action on it, I think that's something. So I think that the youth advisory board is great, but I think that we need to get more granularity as far as the actual structure of it and the chain of command. So that's my one comment on that. As far as questions, one of the questions I have is how much, to what extent you've engaged Dr. Willett, and the superintendent's office as far as getting participation with this and getting students involved, because really that's our captive audience right there. Once they get out of school, we're at the whim of everything underneath the sun, including that 4 hours of TikTok that they put on their on their phone while they're supposed to be doing homework. But things like that, where has there been engagement in it? Has there been discussion as far as building any cooperation between the task force and the superintendent's office?
We, as a task force, we've had Dr. Willett come on, I think 2 times at this point, and also we have Jacob, Jaden, and Tony that are on the Board of Ed also. And Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys bring back kind of what we're talking about and act as the liaison between the Board of Ed and us, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've talked about this specific recommendation there during committee updates, during our Board of Ed meetings. There seems to be some positive reception to these ideas. If I can recall correctly, it's been a few months since we've been looking for this recommendation. I think a lot of our communication has been more with the rec department, specifically with this. But I don't think there's been any opposition from the Board of Ed, but I would say that if we were to go forward with this, we would need to communicate with them more closely. Yep.
Yeah, and as far as the, the teen leadership and skills for adolescents, that piece of it, obviously there has been, I mean, when Dr. Willett came, he was talking about that, and we've gotten the data from him. Madhu actually got the data from him about what people thought of that class, what students thought, and the success rates and all of that stuff. And it was very favorable data,
Yeah.
which is great.
Well, because I think that's, again, I think that the teen leadership and skills for adolescents is a great program. I mean, I think that's something that, again, whatever happens with the budget, I would strongly encourage the Board of Education and Dr. Willett, since it's really up to them to determine whether or not those stay in the budget, that if there is any issue that they remain in. The last question I have is the engagement that the task force has had with regard to some of the other town groups where the recommendation is to get involved in more non-athletic programming, but just knowing from being involved in the in the community, you have the different scouting programs, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. You have 4-H. There's already a youth garden that's in place. You already have the art gallery right down the street here, actually right across the street here, where that they have certain functions at the same time. That you have the church groups that we're right located in the corner of the church area here. If there's been any engagement with them to sort of build upon or see what they have to offer and build upon that, so that there's building of synergy, building a core support, so that they can put it out there within their own groups, saying these are some of the things, because it's more of getting the community involvement and not just relying upon the school or the town, but getting these other groups involved and seeing what they have to offer, and even sort of working that so that when there's something that this youth advisory board comes up, or when there's something that's being put out by the group, that they can include all of these different things and not just rely upon the advisory board or the rec department or the any of the after school programs rely upon that. So has there been engagement with them to sort of see and sort of build that relationship with them?
Yeah, so to an extent, yes. So we've met with Reverend Gallagher, who is a big, we all know Reverend Gallagher. We've met with him. We did research a bit, of, okay, what does Tolland have? The library programming, at least it may have always been advertised much more now, like I'm seeing it. So that's kind of a newer development. Terms of the community seeing and knowing about all the programming, but I know that so part of this recommendation again was about expanding, reimagining, reforming, building off of what we exist. So with this recommendation, certainly that would be a huge next step, is what do we have already, how can we expand and build off of that. And then Maureen also has the local prevention council that has all those major players. I don't know if you want to speak to a little bit about what they've been talking about and your involvement.
Sure. So again, the local prevention council is something that has existed for years. And like a youth advisory board, it's also gone through many iterations. So when I came on in November, again, that was sort of something that I kind of took on and sort of moving towards post-COVID. So some of the members of the council have been doing it for a few years, but for the most part, it's a pretty new group of people. And most of them also are Tolland residents who also have some sort of professional interest in advising. So there's a lot of knowledge there about what's available in town. Many of the members also have kids who are in the school system or are going through the school system. So we've got a pretty good handle on what's available to our youth.
And like I said, the scouting, my kids, they do the scouts, it's great. Tolland has those fabulous things. I think the population, for some reason, there's a high number of kids that aren't necessarily engaged in any social something. And part of this is also, okay, let's understand why, what are the barriers? And that's where it goes back to the rec department, because traditionally the rec department would be also able to do a lot of the things that Maureen listed as our neighboring towns do, but again, we're different. So I think those are all great points, and the goal of this is to say, what do we have? How can we make this more robust using the resources that we have? In addition to getting Bruce some help to help coordinate all the new things that hopefully will come out of this on some level. So yeah,
And can I jump in on
Yeah.
that too? And I was really interested to learn when I was sort of asking around about what other towns are doing. That's also the structure of how they put out programming for the youth is very different in the towns and the way it's funded. You know, as Becky already mentioned, like Bruce does an amazing job with what he puts out there for rec programs. But there are some neighboring towns where the rec department is only the sports stuff. And everything else is through the Youth Service Bureau. And then they're staffed accordingly as well. So I just want to give kudos to Bruce for not being just the sports guy.
And then I think my last comment is I think that, you know, you've identified one of the key issues here is why aren't kids getting involved? And I think that's really the one thing that we really need to understand. I mean, I know that Tolland, it's a huge community, wide area, but not a lot of centralized things. I mean, unless you live near one of the schools, you know, you could be traveling 10 or 15 minutes across town to get something.
Yeah.
And kids might not always have that opportunity, especially with, you know, with many of the parents working, you know, both parents working. And so it makes it a little bit inaccessible sometimes. So I think that's something that, you know, if possible, maybe even engage with the Board of Education, engage with Dr. Willett, and see if they could put out like just sort of like again, general questionnaire. Why aren't people getting involved? Why, like, what are the barriers? Because I think that in order really to address this, we need to recognize what those barriers are, because I think that offering all these things are great, but
We need people to
kids
come.
can't, if kids don't
Yeah.
go to it and the kids can't take
Yep.
advantage of it, then we could do everything that we want and advertise all we want, but it's, you know, we need to find what the barriers are so we can really address those barriers.
I do know that a lot of families and kids, they actually don't go to Tolland. They go to programming in Vernon, or they go to programming in Mansfield. Like my child did swim lessons at Mansfield Community Center, and where we were members of Mansfield Community Center. So we did all the recreation at Mansfield Community Center. You know, also if you live like, you know, if you live close to the Vernon line,
Right.
Vernon has a very robust recreation program. There's senior programming. There's a lot more. So I do know that while it might, I think a better statement would be a good amount of children and families aren't involved in recreational opportunities in Tolland. Because I do know a great deal of families that are like, oh, I just go to this place in Vernon, or I go to Mansfield, I go here, I go there. And I know a lot of sports, for example, Tolland football is now recruiting from like Mansfield, Ellington, Coventry, because we're like the football program, but it's the same for other programming, you know, gymnastics, for example, you have Tri-Town Gymnastics right over the border. People are going to go, they're going to be more towards there because that's the gymnastics program. So I think that's also important to look at too.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. Councilor Lubick.
Thank you, Becky, you always do a great job.
Thank you. I'll try.
Running meetings and even tonight. No particular order. So I guess my first question would be for Bruce, since he's here. So if more programming got added on and the budget did not pass, would you be able to still support or do the additional program that's being requested?
On a personal level, that's a lot more to be put on my plate for a single person trying to program all these programs with the current programming that I am doing. Financially, if we're talking specifically the programs are self-funding, so it's all through the fees that are generated through the programming and the registration. So that aspect of the actual program, you know, depending on what our minimum requirements are, minimum enrollment and things of that nature, would drive the fee. And then we would have to at least meet that minimum enrollment for the program to be successfully run.
Would you have concerns then, not being able to do these great things that the community needs?
I would have concerns. You gotta look at it like this, with the amount of programming that we already do for one person to oversee all these programs, it's very time consuming. And while spring programming is going on, it's just not spring programming that I'm concerned about. I'm also planning now summer and fall, and it's just a vicious cycle. So just because summer programming goes on doesn't mean it's just summer programming that I'm concentrating on. I have fall events that I have to start planning for, finding staff for, and then you throw in some special events like Celebrate Tolland, which is a huge ordeal, and other programs that go on. You start adding more into the mix. That's just more attention that goes away from current programming, future programming, and it just gets a lot more difficult. It's just spreading my time even that thinner than it already is, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I just wanted to make sure that this might be more of a question for Jacob. He's here from the Board of Education. But the teen leadership and skills for adolescents, do you know how much those courses cost in the budget?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how much. And you're talking, I think it's just one teacher that teaches at one full-time equivalent plus supplies. So, around like $70,000 per position and supplies.
Okay, so I guess this is another one that's in the budget. So if it doesn't pass, then that's really in the Board of Education's decision. And maybe you would want to advocate with the Board of Education on that. If that makes sense.
In the past, when we've had things that we've been like, well, this is technically a Board of Ed recommendation, but the town council wants us to go to them. Prior, I don't remember how long ago, I think we floated that to Steve, and you guys talked and you had said like, come to the town council first and then, and I think, more than happy to go to the Board of Ed and advocate for this, but I also think that Jacob, Jaden, Tony have been advocating for it also. So I definitely, it is, the Board of Ed would have to protect that funding. And Jacob, I'm more than happy to go to a Board of Ed meeting to present this case. So, but I do think that Jacob's been advocating pretty heavily for it also.
For the record, we've been talking a little bit about, well, there was a slight reduction in our budget anyway. That was a discussion point. The class was protected. I don't think that there's a large desire to get rid of the course. Not to turn this into a Board of Ed meeting, but just for the record, I don't think that there's that's going to be like a first target for things. Just so everybody knows. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Jacob. Jacob's great at the mental health task force. He really is. Let me see. That's really, in our subcommittees, Lisa, Tammy's not here, unfortunately. She's been advocating for at least some just summer programming only at this point with that money. Hopefully that's on Thursday's agenda, but I'm not sure. So even though it's not year long, maybe if council approves that eventually and it goes ahead, then we'll be able to see if some more programming gets filled up and we'll have a better idea. I don't know if that might be something too, but I'll let other people know.
Thank you, Councilman Check. Are there any other councilors? John?
I'd just like to make a comment. I have a question. I thank you very much for the work you guys have done. I think it's great. I know you spent a lot of time on this, and I think it's very valuable information that you presented tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, John, for being part of the task force. You worked on this too, so.
Well, you're spearheading it, so.
Yeah. Yes, but I appreciate the participation.
No, they agree with John. They run a great meeting and very efficient. So
Thank you.
Task force.
Thank you.
One other question I have, and I don't honestly put the cart before the horse, but just looking at the first recommendation for programming, do you foresee any discussions for that youth advisory board about any infrastructure being needed? I'm just, at least for my person, just to maybe back up a little bit, my personal experience growing up in town. I went to what was middle school, now intermediate school. You do like an honors program or some kind of volunteer work. I would literally walk from here to what's now the military museum, and that's the teen center. So that either do the cashier thing or manage the games. Do you foresee the youth advisory board wanting to put recommendations forward for some sort of infrastructure to create that central hub that Councilor Luba, I think, alluded to, something that's walkable, that's safe for people to kind of get into a centralized area within maybe the green,
Mhm.
or not too far from one of the main school areas that
Yeah.
has sidewalks that's already connectable.
Yeah, when we first started talking about this recommendation, we did toss around the idea of, do we think it needs to be a rec center? Or like, we were kind of going back and forth on what that would look like. My response to that would be that the more you can empower youth to make decisions and have a voice in the community, the better off everybody will be. The kids are going to be happier. They're going to have more self-esteem. Therefore, there's a wide ripple effect. The community in general will be happier the more empowered whoever is on the youth advisory board is. So to give them that capability of making a recommendation for the town council to hear it, if they say like, hey, we need a place that's central, for the town council to hear it and actually act on it, that's going to be very powerful. So my hope and dream, and I would guess that Maureen is probably on board with this, would be that, yes, we would want them. We would want their voice heard in the community. Is that?
Yeah, no, that
Okay.
answers the question.
Yeah.
And so I think then the next steps for us, I mean, obviously we're gonna take this all into consideration, but it sounds like some of that ball is already rolling within human services, and probably within a reasonable amount of time, we might get an update, probably either from human services with the task force, or similar to what we have tonight, kind of a joint update on how those processes are going.
Right, and also, so the teen leadership in particular, so that programming is probably going to, I don't want to say feed into, but when you have individuals on a youth advisory board and a teen leadership class, there's going to be natural leaders that emerge. And those natural leaders, it's great to recognize that strength and kind of recruit for the youth advisory board, like, hey, we think you'd be really good at this. Again, that's going to feel really good for anybody. So I really, just another example of how all of this plays into each other.
Yeah.
It really comes down to, when you have engaged and empowered youth in town, they're going to be more likely to stay in Tolland. They're going to be happier. They're going to have better grades. There's just going to be an all around better community feel, and their parents are going to be happier. Families will be happier. All in all, it's a ripple effect.
That's great. I think just one final comment just that came off the top of my head, because of Earth Day, we had the cleanups, and some of the events that were happening around town had children involved, is maybe also connecting with the Conservation Commission about having, family hikes and those sorts of events where a lot of the trails are in neighborhoods. So for that comment about, people can't really walk or easily bike to the town green, if there's maybe like family days on the trails, there can be a coordinator similar to the Earth Day cleanup that, you go to the neighborhood like Palmer, Kendall Mountain, that area.
Right.
There's different streets that are right off of
Mhm.
neighborhoods. People could,
Yeah.
congregate there for activities that are, not in front of the phone, and you can certainly take great, beautiful photos and put them on Instagram, but.
Well, and that's a great example of how, kind of what Bruce was saying,
Yeah.
that, he would be spread so thin to organize something like that and do it to its full potential. It's going to be really hard for him. So it's just more support for an additional person to help manage something like that. In terms of the additional rec employee, I think what I heard Bruce saying is that, he doesn't want to do things partially. Essentially with all of these things on somebody's plate, it would just all be kind of trying to get it all done. But like, do we really want that as a town? Probably not. We want enough staffing that makes it able that we can do this 100%.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That Tolland does really excel in having dedicated volunteership, but it's good to have a dedicated staff member there.
You need somebody to
really-
coordinate it and to
yeah.
brainstorm and to do all those things, because not people will volunteer and they'll say, yeah, sure, I'll help with that. But
Yeah.
then when it's like, are you going to spearhead it? They're like, no. So
Yeah, there's
you know, you
liability,
need
there's
that.
liability and
Right.
responsibility in having
Sure.
dedicated staff members. for
Yep.
those things.
Yep.
No, that's great. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from counselors?
As she says that it's kind of little late, but if the pandemic doesn't pass, I guess we can talk about it. That's one. Question number two. As you said, the registration for the kids and everything else, and advertising. Maybe I can help a little bit of this chamber, out of this chamber. There's the asking place in by the car wash. In my place, I think I have the talent goes there,
Mhm.
vice versa.
Mhm.
We can advertise over there, but if you like to get involved and get a registration, what I can offer on my personal behalf is like whomever are interested, the kids of it, and I think we can offer something for if you want it, if you register, we can offer you a ice cream or whatever it is, like trying to make it out, try to just attract them.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
That's great. Good for Maureen to know.
So
She's
you'd
gonna
like
be
to-
following up with you about that
Ice cream
ice cream.
social
Yeah.
I might have to sample.
I
just heard, what?
So like, get them together, simple.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention through Human Services, we're doing the summer theater program again. The other activity was quite a challenge to get a lot of volunteers. We hope to start the coffee house program again, working. So we're trying to bring back some of those other programs that, not sports related. So.
No, that's great. Thank you. That's great, Beth. And I think there's also been talking just about back to council. I know that there was a veterans coffee house. Like that'd be good to maybe coordinate and maybe sync games, and you could have kids meeting with vets and kind of bringing them together and having those experiences, multi-generational involvement and socialization. I
And
think would
we've
also
done
be
that at the
beneficial
senior
for everybody.
center and work with the vets and
Yeah.
I'll talk to you about
Okay, all on board.
Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Becky. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for
tonight.
having us.
Thank you, Bruce.
We'll be back with
Appreciate it.
more, don't worry.
Oh,
We're not done yet.
Oh, yeah, no. Moving on to item 7B is reports from town council liaisons. I usually start right to left, so council, you to check if you're good to go first. If not, I can go left to right, start saying with council.
I can go first. Okay. So the commission, people with disabilities met last week on the 21st, the presentation. Penny, she's a part-time case manager for human resources here. She specifically spoke about Medicaid waivers, services for those employed, disabled, housing options, and innovative housing initiatives. I believe she's got to be posting a big presentation that she did online. There's a lot of good resources in there. And on Thursday, this Thursday, our subcommittee meets. That's really it for me.
Great, thank you, Councilor Luba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the only meeting I had over the past 2 weeks is the Veterans Recognition Commission. We had a very good meeting that we are very appreciative of the Lions Club and other organizations that came forward and were able to provide the VRC with some tents and some chairs. And I know that they're working with the historic district to find a spot within the jail. All taken care of. Of course, Lisa, you rock with that. That's awesome. So the big thing that we're looking at now is that on May 21st, that we will be setting up a tent over at the car show that we held, I think, out in front of the military museum in town. So that's one of the things we'll be involved in. That we're looking at getting involved in some different community events, including the parade and other things like that, being able to set up our tents and be able to get our information out there. The biggest thing that that left and that we wanted to make sure to thank the town for is that for use of the facilities as far as for the mailers, helping us generate the mailers, the folding and everything else, and getting them mailed out, where that's the biggest thing is sending it out. There's actually, we identified 600 veterans that we don't have contact with, so that we were able to get these mailers out and at least get input, so that we can begin moving on things that you've already mentioned about the coffee house. There's a big movement on that where we're trying to coordinate with the Danielson Veterans Coffee House and the Eastern Connecticut Veterans Coffee House, to at least meet with them, find best practices and other things like that, so that we can move forward and sort of really shape what we'd like to see our coffee house look like for at least meeting up with veterans, having different programs and being able to start serving as a central point of information for veterans in town, since there's with a lot of the changes in the law and veterans benefits, that there's a lot of things that we need to pass along. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. For me, I actually was not able to make the Water Commission meeting last night, so I refer to the minutes. Otherwise, the Conservation Commission has a meeting this Thursday. Vice Chair Reed?
Planning and zoning, I wasn't able to make that meeting, so I'll refer you to the minutes on that one as well. On April 19th, WPCA met, and there was a discussion about 62 Merrill Road, that's the Papa T's Plaza. There was discussion about the grease trap for Papa T's, and they talked about sharing a grease trap between Papa T's and the Electric Blue. 576 Old Post Road, there was a fire within the house, and there's some work being done there, so the driveway is done. And there's a sewer line on the property, but that is currently in a holding pattern. And then 522 Old Post Road, that's somebody wants to hook up to the sewer line there, but they have not submitted an application. They're still waiting on that. And then we received an update on the Vernon Sewer Treatment Plant, and the completion of that project has been pushed out to June of 23. That's all I have for that.
Thank you. I'll just add for the PCC, I believe one thing I saw at the front of the news is that they did pass the Santini development. So I think they said that would be, they'd expect full occupancy by, I think it was the summer of 2025 or 26 or something in the article, but that did pass last night. So
There's no meeting.
okay. Moving right along.
You have.
Oh, sorry, Councilman Murray, sorry about that.
Absolutely. Before I do mine on Historic District Commission, did I miss one from Board of Ed?
I'm not sure who's assigned. I did my tenure.
You have to double check who might have been in this there for
Yeah.
the Wednesday for April, but
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I missed it. I'm trying to keep track.
I know we do have to catch up over the summer. I think that we do need to sign up to people for June and July, but
Thank you. I attended the Historic District Commission meeting. They met last Wednesday, the 20th. They dealt with one COA for replacement windows. They're continuing their work on the Historic District design guidelines. It looks like they're taking a chunk of that every meeting, so they continue to plow through that. And the other item that they talked about was sidewalk accessibility. The engineer was in attendance on that meeting and gathered some feedback from the Historic District Commission. And I did, after the meeting, I did let Lisa know that she might want to review the recording because I am a little bit concerned about this group and the community people with disabilities coming to some sort of common ground on the issue of sidewalks on the green. While I wasn't able to attend the Commission on People with Disabilities meeting that Colleen did, I did talk to her a little bit about that. And I think these two groups are pretty far apart in terms of what they want to do and how they're going to approach this. That's a concern of mine. I think this is an area where we have two groups in town who maybe want different things, and I want to make sure that the council knows that we do have these two disparate groups, because I think we might need to start discussing a leadership role in bringing these groups together and addressing this issue. That's it for me. Thank you.
thank you.
Question, did you say they?
No, that we were able to because the town was, that they used the folder and.
Oh, I was gonna say, I can help with that.
Yeah, no, it's all set. So thank you very much. You know.
With that, we are on to item 8, new business, appointments, vacancies on various boards and commissions, which I don't believe we do have any. So just a friendly reminder to reach out to vacancies@tolland.org or actually tollandct.gov. Now that we've officially changed.
Yeah.
We switched over to the .gov, so be sure to reach out to them if you're interested and check out the packet for the available vacancies. Then we are on to old business, which there's none, so report of the interim town manager.
Okay, I have a few things for you this evening. First of all, for those of you who can see that are here, on the back wall, you see a blank bulletin board up there. It's going to be dressed up some, we have to order like the background paper, but that is going to be for the artwork for the Board of Education to share with the town. We will be starting that sometime in May. We're coordinating them bringing it over. And each month it'll turn around. There may be some time in the summer when the children aren't around where some things may stay for a longer period of time, but then it'll go back to changing monthly. So that is happening. So if anyone could also share with Counselor Nutio also.
Yeah.
That, you know, I think this will work for what you were hoping for. And so, you know, we had to make it move forward and make it happen. So we're working together with the Board of Ed and it will happen. So that was the easy one. In response to Counselor Murray, also, I did listen to the recording in its entirety. And I just feel that the sidewalk issue is right back where we started last year and the year before. And I'm hoping that this engineer that we're working with, this landscape designer engineer, will be able to come forward with some recommendations after meeting with both groups to come forward to get everybody together in one room, which is our plan, including any other stakeholders that would want to participate, and to try to come to some sort of resolution or agreed upon resolution to make something work for everybody. And I know it's very difficult to try to keep the historical look of the district and the value of the granite that's there, but then to try to be able to make it ADA, just leveling stones and things like that is not, I don't think it's going to be possible to make that ADA accessible, but we'll see what the consultant can share with us, and hopefully we can come to agreement on something. But there may have to be some sort of decision, of course, on how to proceed. So that was the second part. Now the last thing that I wanted to chat about was just to bring you a little up to speed on the Firehouse Projects. What is going on? I'll start with the first two portable, oh my God. Thank you. Well, the design build buildings, that was for station 340 and 440. And we ran into some delays because of the geotech foundation design. The original information was not useful, and we had to go back out and get this geotech information right from the field. So that delayed the project a little bit. Also, the wetlands permitting took several months more than we had anticipated that it would take, but they got through all of that. Now I had our engineer put the timeline together. The plan is to begin, we've already got the documents for the contracts to go out to bid, pretty much put together. We just need to get a little more stakeholder comments and any sort of update for the cost estimate done in May. We hope to commence the bid for the public bid in May. In June, we hope to open the bids, because you have to give at least a good month for these developers to get everything together, go through the specs and everything like that. So we will hopefully award the contract in June, The contractor will commence the design, building permit, and construction in July. We will raise Station 340 and commence working on 340 construction in November. July of 23, we hope to finish the 340, 440 construction. And in August of 23, that's the plan to raise Station 440 and finish the site work. So there's a lot involved. There's hopes that both units can be constructed at the same time. It's all gonna see how things will go with the building process. Now, the other concerns that we have now with COVID, this timeline is in place with hoping that there's not going to be significant delays in materials, supplies, labors, things like that due to the whole COVID backlog that's happening out there in almost every type of commodity you could think of right now. So that we don't know for sure until we go out to bid to see where that's at. We don't know, because of the COVID and everything else, the cost of materials has risen. We won't know until we go out to bid if that is going to have an impact on the budget. Some thoughts are that it possibly could. So with that being said, this is just for the 2 stations. We could have some potential increases that weren't expected. There may not be sufficient funding out of the whole $5 million. We will not know that until we get these 2 projects going. That's one piece of it. And then I'll speak about some of the options if that comes to fruition. Now with Station 140, I'll give you a little background on that one. We're re-looking at that whole project. During the design, we scanned the block walls of the vehicle bay to determine if sufficient steel reinforcing was present in the walls to allow for the connection of the addition. The scanning was necessary as the original design plans did not show steel reinforcing the walls. During the scan, it was determined that bond beams were not present within the block walls, and these provide the horizontal support reinforcing that block wall. Due to the height of the wall, 16 feet, a bond beam is required by code in the middle and at the top of the wall. In order to meet the current code, bond beams will need to be added to the existing walls. This may add a significant cost to this project. Because of that, we're looking at a cost comparison versus doing the addition and rehabbing the building versus raising it and doing another building very much like we're just getting cost estimates. We're not making these decisions because certainly that will be the council's purview. I'm just saying we're trying to get some information, data in order to be able to provide good decisions for the future when if it's necessary. As you recall, 140 was going to be the final project. We're still waiting to hear from the state regarding $1 million grant that I know Councilor Nuccio Representative Nuccio is working on getting for the town. It hasn't passed as of yet. So we're still waiting to hear about that. So with that, what we're looking at is the 2 potential things of, if we're going to add that beam for the support, or if it's less costly and still get a building that will provide for the needs, we'll get a cost for that as well and see which one would be the less costly option. Certainly with all this in mind, okay, if everything starts looking like it may be more than $5 million, what I would probably do, or what I would do, is come back to all of you and say, here's the situation, here's what's going on, here's the cost. We may have to redo the scope of the original bond resolution that was put in place. Maybe pull out the Station 140, sort of very similar to what we had to do with Birch Grove School, whereas some of the costs were so excessive that we had to carve out pieces of it. This is only a thought right now. Certainly there may be other suggestions forthcoming, but one of my recommendations would be, if we're in that situation, is to maybe carve out Station 140. The grant would hopefully come in by then, decide what would happen, and we would more than likely either, if it's under the threshold of the 5%, try to go for non-referendum bonding for that piece of it. I still would need to get legal opinion as to if I could carve that out and do it that way. But these are the thoughts that are in my mind right now, and I wanted to at least give you a heads up. The other thought was possibly, I was speaking with Councilor Yudichak briefly about, we were talking about ARPA funds and potential uses and things like that. And I said, well, I think we need to hold off a little bit because there is a situation with the firehouse, but it's not definite yet. So maybe possibly we could use ARPA funding for any shortfall rather than going out to debt, because I'd rather not issue any more debt than we have to. So that was another alternative for future discussion. So I had requested, let's kind of slow down a little bit until we get a better feel for where we're at. So that was the big news for this evening. The other thing was the referendum being moved to the recreation center that was due to safety requests of the registrars of voters to expand the area a little bit. So they decided to move the location to the recreation center. That is May 3rd, yeah. 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we have signs posted all over the doors of the building. Library staff has been trained to make sure that they have their visual board as well, but they will also be trained to provide where the location is, give directions. There'll be sandwich boards out there. The fire department already has theirs on their electronic sign already. They had it last week. I was up here on Sunday, and it was showing the right information there. The sandwich boards on the green will have all the information. We're e-blasting it. We're trying to get it out there every which way. So, so that's all I have for an update, unless you have any other questions of me.
I have a quick question, and I see Councilor Murray's hands up.
Yes.
The first question I have is, would it be incumbent on us, once all information has been gathered by Chuck, our engineer, been presented to the building committee, which I assume the building committee is kind of the manager's office, probably Leslie, the fire department, that they would be able to come back to the council to kind of give a more formal update on that?
Oh, absolutely. Once we, it's going to take a little time to get the bids in. I'm looking at possibly June. At that point, we would bring an update as to how the project's going as well. And if it appears that some of the concerns I have right now might be coming to fruition, we'll give you an update either way.
Okay.
But definitely, if we have to take action, that will definitely be something that I'll chat with you about, and you and John, and then we can get it on the agenda.
Thank you. So Councilman Murray, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for that update, Lisa. I do have a couple of questions, and I'll start with the firehouse. Is there a building committee for that project?
Yes, it's not, I'd have to go back. It was approved. It's basically, it's not a formal committee such as like the one that was required for like the Birch Grove School and all that. But there is a committee that works together. It includes John Lytell, the Director of Public Safety, Carl Dozian, Rob Dabika, who is Fire Marshal. Carl Dozian is the Assistant Chief. We have Scott Lappin, Beverly Bellady, myself, and I feel like it's Chuck Eaton, who's the engineer. I'm trying to think of who else.
Would Leslie be on it as well?
Leslie is involved whenever there's anything
Grant,
that we're trying to do with a grant. We pull her. Yes, Leslie is involved. I'm sorry, she's
That's what I figured.
she's overseeing getting everybody, you know, to at least provide some coordination between everybody and the needs that are needing to be addressed. So it's working very well in that respect. The need for having like a formal appointed building committee with this project, it's a design build project. So it's not so much as having, you know, community input as far as how to construct the building or what it's going to be made of and this, that. It's a design build situation for the 2 units. Plus,
I'm familiar with how a design build works, as the Birch Grove project was a design build as well, and the modulars. How was the building committee decided? Was that something that the council approved?
you know, I don't think it was council, and I'm trying to remember how it started before I was in this position for the interim. So I'm trying to remember how everybody was pulled together.
Yeah, I think, if I may, I think it was something that when the proposal was first brought forward, that that there was a discussion as far as the design team, because this is something that they designed when the design was presented. That's where this informal building committee had already been, you know, basically established, where Lisa took over as a town manager, and then once we added in the special projects position, that's where that came in. But everything else had already been in the works as design. So basically, it was presented to us as that. So I don't think there was ever an official, as Lisa was saying,
Right.
an official one set up like Birch Grove, but that the proposal was brought forward, and it was a town council that approved it and approved it with the people that were already working on the project as moving forward as the quote unquote the building committee.
Right. Mike Rosen was involved in the beginning, and I was on it as finance director, and you know, on the financial perspective, and now I'm kind of doing both as in that position.
Sure. Is the building committee being asked to report to council on a regular basis?
No, but I'm making it a point to make sure I keep you updated as to once we have things moving. This was the first report we were finally able to get together and get moving on all this.
Sure. How come it went to referendum without firm costs in place? Just, that was one of the pushbacks we got with Birch Grove. So I'm kind of wondering why we went down that same road with this project.
We did have firm costs in place, and we felt very comfortable with the firm costs that we had. What happened was COVID and supplies and demand and economics that are now making that change. You know, we had built some contingency into that number, but this was totally unanticipated that, you know, these things were going to happen.
Sure, but when you were talking about Station 140, it sounded like it was unknown until very recently that the necessary structure was not in place. So that, to me, that again, from my Birch Grove experience, that seems like it's going to have a pretty big impact maybe on the price. So if it feels a little bit like maybe not everything was known before it went to referendum.
We had an engineer look at it. It's the same engineer who is doing the design work. And at that point, we have to depend on the professionals that we hire to point these things out. They did, when they started their work and did this scan, they determined that it didn't have what they thought it had.
Well, it wasn't on the plans, right? Is that what you said? That's what was in the email we saw too. That it wasn't on the plans.
No, but they still thought that there'd be some sort of support for all this. And when they did their design, their engineers and such, they determined that it wouldn't be sufficient. Oh, sorry. That the steel wouldn't be sufficient to support it.
So there is steel in there?
Yes, they were, well, let me rephrase that. During the scan, they determined that the bond beams were not present in the block walls, and they were under the assumption that it was in there, as far as my understanding of this. And it wasn't. So that's where they would need to add these bond beams to the existing walls to support it. I by no means am a engineer, so I had to provide you more detail, but I don't have it. And again, this all started before I was in this position, so now I'm trying to move forward with making sure we're covered and making sure everything is done appropriately. And this is results.
Okay. Thank you for answering all those questions about the firehouse. I appreciate that. If I have any more questions, I'll go through Steve on that. I did have some questions about the mailer that was sent out to our residents regarding the budget. And as you're nodding your head, you probably know, I've had a number of neighbors and friends come to me confused about where they're going to vote. And that there's a lot of confusion because an official mailing that came from the town says one place, and I'm telling them it's someplace else, and which one of those is right. And so I'm sorry, go ahead. It looks like you want to say something.
For you to finish and then I'll respond.
I'm looking to better understand the timeline of how the sequence of events that led us to the place we are now, where incorrect information was sent out to our residents.
Well, at the time that it was printed and the $1,000 was spent to have them printed, it was before they had changed the location. The registrars had changed the location. So they were already in process, ready to go out in the mail, and the printer had all this. The printer took care of the mailing with the post office and such. Right after that happened, while it was already in process, the registrars changed the location. Now on that mailer, it does say, please note that this, we had to make it all fit. There's only so much room on the, we did note that there, but yes, the location on the mailer does say the library program room. We are going to make every effort to make, as I mentioned earlier, that we are communicating to everybody in every way we can to get the word out that location has been changed. When people show up at the library, there are notices that if they show up at town hall, if you come by town hall, the signs are here. We've e-blasts out everything, and it's going to continue. We'll send another round out to try to get the word out there. All I can say is I appreciate if anybody asks you to please clarify and tell them as well. We're doing whatever we can. Had I known that he was going to officially change the location, I would have, had it changed. Unfortunately, we didn't have the information in time and everything had been done.
Okay. I know you said that on the day of the budget referendum that librarians are going to be prepared to redirect voters, and that there's going to be signs out there. Are there going to be any other efforts? I mean, to redirect voters, what about between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. when the library opens?
We plan on having sandwich boards out there. I'm working with the registrar of voters to make sure that, there's some sort of directions that tell people, again, there will be signs on the doors as well, stating where to go. But I'm hoping before people can even get into the parking lot, I'd like to have a sandwich board that says, location change, go half a block further and turn right into the recreation center, something to that effect. And again, like I said, we'll send out e-blasts and such.
But the mailer went to every residential address, is that correct?
Yes.
And what's the differential between the number of addresses we have and the number of people who are on the e-blast? There's a pretty big gap there, right?
I don't know how many people are on our, we're posting every which way we can. Our Facebook page, unfortunately, we are locked out of our Facebook page. I think I have shared this a couple of times. We're trying to see what we can do to access it. Right now, I have no way of accessing our Facebook page to post anything. So what I try to do is I have my own personal Tolland Facebook as me, and I'll try to put things out to the groups that I'm aware of. Certainly, if any of you wouldn't mind sharing, that's totally up to you. The location change, that would certainly be helpful to get the word out that way. We're communicating it in so many different ways. I don't know what else we can do. And if you have any suggestions, I'm open to hear them.
Oh, well, I did notice that there's a sandwich board on the green with like the letters that move, so you can kind of create your own wording. And that sandwich board says that the location is at the rec center, but there are a number of other sandwich boards that I noticed throughout town. There's one further down on the green, kind of closer to the red and white, that says budget referendum May 3rd. I've seen one at Birch Grove that says budget referendum May 3rd, but none of those have the location of the budget referendum. And I was actually wondering, why not?
Let me check into that. They were supposed to have that. So you said near the red and white?
Yeah, I noticed it yesterday when I was driving through the green.
Education may have done.
No, this wasn't a Board of Education sign. I've seen these signs up in previous years as well. Usually the Board of Ed does theirs like right next to there. Yeah, and this one's actually on the green between the 195 and the carriage road. It's on the green.
I'll check that
and
out.
There's one by Birch Grove. There's a couple, I think in the past I've seen one by Heron Cove Park. I guess I haven't driven all around town to find them all. But I was wondering why those sandwich boards didn't have the correct location, or any location at all really, for where voters are going or can vote. So thank you. I appreciate you looking into that, and I look forward to hearing what happened there. I believe that if I remember correctly, one of the reasons that we changed to the library program room to have our budget referendums was in an effort to save the town some money in the elections process. We're at the point now where, unfortunately, that effort to save money has could potentially cause voter confusion. And I'm wondering, how much money are we really saving by having just one voting location instead of everybody voting at the same location every time they go to vote? Because, voters this year assuming that the budget referendum, say, passes the first time, they'll vote in one place for the budget referendum, and then later this year, there'll be a primary for a number of elected positions where voters will go back to their quote unquote regular voting location. And then there'll be a general election in November where voters vote at their regular voting location. And I worry about any confusion I think voter confusion is something we should try to avoid.
Well, I certainly agree with you, regarding voter confusion and all that. I've never heard, since we've been doing this, I haven't heard of any confusion. Normally we would hear the complaints, and I haven't heard of any, with the budget referendum and all that. But then again, maybe other people are hearing it and we weren't. But normally we hear about these things. The registrar talks to me all the time, even when I was doing director of finance stuff, he would share certain concerns with me. So if there are, I can certainly talk to him. The concern of going to 2 locations really is a challenge for so many reasons. Is trying to get poll workers, trying to go between, the registrars going between 2 locations. Yes, we do that for the elections, things like that. But with the budget process is usually a lot less voters that come out. I would certainly hope that we get a good turnout, but historically, the numbers when it comes to the budget have been less versus an election period for president and council and all that. So the cost involved is that now you have to staff 2 locations. That is substantial. You have the registrars trying to go between both. So they're and the electricity, the telephone lines that you have to sign up for, setting up in 2 locations. There's a lot involved. So that is the logic behind it. So it does save money, it does save time, and it makes it a little more efficient for the process.
Would it be possible for you to get us that value for how much money is saved by having a single location?
I can ask for it, yes.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I'm interested in that. And I'm sorry, I heard you say that there are going to be some sandwich boards and signage out in front of the library on the day of the referendum. But what about between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. when I know a decent amount of the turnout actually happens during that time? Are there going to be any people at the library to redirect voters, or are we just relying on signage to redirect voters?
I am going to speak with the registrar to see what he had planned. I think he did talk about that, but I need to confirm with him what he's going to do. And again, I can let you know.
That would be great. Thank you.
Make sure that before people even start to turn in to the parking, they'll see a sign right at the entrance.
Sure.
Move forward.
Sure, absolutely. And those are my questions. Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate you humoring me and answering all my questions.
Not humoring you, but I'm responding. Okay. Oh, and one other quick thing, because Mike Wilkinson did just text me some quick information. He said some of the sandwich boards that are out there don't allow for the extra room. So I really have to look at them and see if those are those types. Maybe we might have to invest. I know they're expensive. We may have to invest in additional boards or something, but we'll take a look at it and see what we can do.
Okay, yeah, it looked like they were printed. I didn't know that there was a restriction on how much could be printed. I think there's a lot of white space, and it might not be white, it might be a color. So forgive me if I'm using the wrong term, but it certainly looked to me like there might be room to do that, especially since it's such an important, this is a change in location. And I know you're doing a lot of outreach to make sure people know the right place to go. It looked to me like this was a missed opportunity. Thank you.
I appreciate you pointing it out, and I will look into whatever we can do, certainly.
I think Councilor Connors next, and Councilor Lupa. And I'm just gonna make a quick point note that I think the registrar's office will be same day registration, so maybe we'll have volunteers there to be able to direct or be near the entryway to that door, because that's where the troop sees, the police offices are, so, but Councilor Connors and then Councilor Lupa.
I think at the bottom of that banner, I think it's sometimes you make there's a space at the bottom, just if you can patch up something, whatever it is. I think that's a great job.
Yeah, if
At the top, I
certainly,
think
if we
there's a
can,
space at the bottom.
if there is space, we will definitely find a way to do it.
I think I got a couple questions and one comment. Facebook. Is there a way we can get a kid from high school and just ask her to create a new Facebook, and then we can get along, because it's been like what, 5 months, 6 months? It's been
Yeah,
like,
it's
we've
well,
been
maybe
getting up.
4 months or so.
So get-
I know it's
get
right
over-
around
get over with
Christmas
it and just
time when
get some.
I wish
Get
it
it
were
out.
that easy. I really do. The problem is because of it being a government page, there's so many, we have other pages that are linked to like a master account. And the appropriate way is you have to have those controls in place. Whereas it's not just like your normal personal Facebook page, which you could just, manage it. We have certain controls in place so that there's certain limitations pursuant to the social media policies that we have that link the veterans. I might have just put the wrong one out there, but there's other commissions and
We can make
such.
it a simple Facebook, a simple page, and where we can post simple information like referendum. Anything else like coming out from Tolland, rather
Well-
than Lisa, Sammy,
Sure,
John, whatever. It's like, I think it's a simple way to do it.
we're
And-
looking into it. It's just the time and
Time.
the
yeah,
staff
because it's
that we're
been like-
trying to deal
it's
with.
been
I definitely would
time,
not
anyway.
want,
Can I just,
Uh,
can I just-
Go ahead.
John, just comment, while you're talking about Facebook, is there any way that other departments, they have pages too, like the rec center and the fish?
everybody it's trickling down. Everyone's starting to get locked out.
Or-
The Economic Development Commission, you're aware of that one, they're locked out. It's just,
everybody-
and all that.
every
Okay.
department
it's
is, yeah,
a
they're talking
challenge.
I
about
just thought it was just
No, and, I can understand the reason why the person who originally developed that page does not want to give out their own personal identification to unlock it, because it's their personal information. I don't want to say names. And it probably should have been developed in a different way where it shouldn't have used someone's personal information to set it up, because now we cannot unlock it. And now I'm trying to find a way to see if there is a way that we could work with Facebook somehow to get that unlocked, because there's a lot of followers who are already in place, that are already members of that page. Recreating a page you want to talk about confusion, can certainly add to confusion, especially if you have to recreate all the other pages that go along with it. So we're trying to find a way to break the system. And I know Brenda Faluzzi, who's no longer on the town council, I know she has a lot of Facebook experience.
Mhm.
We're going to try to tap her. We have spoken to her a couple of times, and we're not sure if there's really anything we can do. And I'm just hoping it doesn't have to go back to square one and start all over. And it may come down to that. But
My next question is I would say a dumb question, but what is an e-blast?
that's not a dumb question. E-blast is an electronic posting that we send out through email to any resident who has signed up for our Tolland alert systems, Tolland messaging. which they can get through our webpage, Tolland.gov, www.tolland.gov. There's a place on the webpage where they could sign up to receive important notifications from the town or whatever they're interested in. There's different things.
Whomever signed up. Right? Beside that, I mean,
That's the only ones that get it is if they signed up for it.
okay. Try to, question number 3, comments. Number about that, you're talking about those sign, pictures for the kids, everything else.
Mhm.
Is it easy way to use that is a right on top of it? So it's much easier rather than printing everything else.
That?
Yeah.
That,
Everything is digital, everything like whenever there's a meeting.
No, I think we talked about that at the last council meeting, and I think there were some folks that didn't like having another screen put up. I think that was something that was being considered, but no, I think ultimately everyone kind of wanted to have like a physical, the actual copy, and I think the parents wanted their kids' artwork to be physically showcased for the Board of Ed meetings versus just a
It's
digital copy.
easy to change and easy to maintain, and it's much
I agree. I don't
much
have.
cheaper than using a color copy and everything else. It's like everything is like there and keep changing it. That's and my last thing is ADA, the sidewalk. I know we've been talking about it, but like, is there one that I don't know what the legality is, like how wide is it or whatever it is, but then as you're saying that it's not even surface. Is there a way possibly that I think we might have a qualified manager or whomever, they can take a look, and then if they can fix even whatever, so maybe, it's a little bit suitable rather than spending more money on the study and hiring Scott again, and then
I think he's, I think about Chuck, the engineer.
oh no,
but he's
Chuck
talking
is
about-
not involved in this
Chuck.
one.
I'm
And
sorry.
we already have hired somebody to do this study and design to see what alternatives can be proposed. Because we were at a point when we brought the two groups together, 3 groups with the town council, to discuss the different alternatives. We weren't getting anywhere. And we were supposed to meet again in June of this year to reopen the subject. And I had some money available to at least get someone involved that could sort of, not exactly mediate, but they could at least provide different proposals or options going forward, because just to bring everyone together, I felt it would be an inefficient use of everyone's time without some sort of alternatives that were spelled out. And but he's met with the stakeholders involved with the needs, and he's going to try to come up with some alternative. So there are things that can be discussed at this meeting to see how the council would want to move forward.
No, I'm sorry.
No, go
The
ahead.
last one related to that. Between last year, I don't know, I wasn't here last year, but like between last year and this year, we've been hiring and studies and everything else. Is it much cheaper to just get our own engineers and using whatever it is, because like using outside and how much we are paying out sources and everything else, and I don't know. But I think it's like within this year, I think we spent what, 30,000-40,000, maybe more,
I have to look
between
at how much.
medical field and a couple of other studies, and now is this.
Well, the Miracle Field was a shared cost.
I know,
so
but
thank
I'm
God
just saying
for
that, I'm just
but,
using the name, it's not something but between 3 or 4 studies, we already paid what, 30, 40, 50,000.
Right, and an engineer would probably cost us with benefits over, I'd say 115,000, 120,000. a year with benefits. And we're currently not spending that amount of money for the services that we've used so far. But there are pros and cons. You raise a very good point, because having an in-house engineer would make things much more efficient for us. We don't have to wait for people to get back to us. Again, and there's a little more buy-in to the community as far as that's concerned. On the other side, if you need specialized engineering services that you may only have one type of engineer, outsourced firms can provide the different types of engineering things that you might need. So, for example, this sidewalk one required someone who had historical preservation experience as well as engineering design type experience, whereas our Chuck doesn't, have as much as this, someone who's a little more involved in that. The other problem that we had, and I'm not ruling out going back to a fully funded position. I think we wanted to just try a little bit longer to see how this is working. The other problem we've had is trying to attract qualified engineers for the position. Our luck over the past couple of times hasn't been good with the outcomes. So, it's certainly something I wouldn't say cut it out, don't do it. But for the time being, here's where we're at, and we may come, or the new manager, whoever it may be, may come back with that recommendation to bring it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Khan. Councilor Luba?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some questions that I had regarding the referendum. I mean, building upon what Ms. Murray asked about. Now, we've been using the library room for how many years now for the referendum? Or is it?
Quite a few.
Yeah, so it's been a long-standing thing. So this wasn't something that was just changed in the past year or two for any economic reasons. It was something that's been going on for at least as long as I've been here. Is that about right?
I think so, yeah.
And and just so I understand the way that things played out, that it was said at the library room that the mailers were sent to go be printed. They were printed, being ready to be sent out, and that's when the registrars decided to change the location after we had already, after this had already been basically put in motion.
From my understanding, they were already going out.
Okay.
That's because I tried to see if there was a way I could stop it, and then I looked down and there they were already on the table, and the others were already out in the mail, from what I understand.
And was there a specific reason why the registrars changed the location?
Yes, because they were concerned about the uptick in the COVID cases, that they wanted to be able to spread the people out, spread them out more so that there would be safety for the poll workers as well as the people coming in.
Okay, so this is something that it just happened to be that was the timing of it right now, where they could have changed it, a week later, and we would still be in the same situation.
Absolutely.
And that was based upon their assessment of the situation, based upon I think it was it the governor's office even sent out something saying about about the COVID concerns or about the upticks?
I can't specifically answer that, but I'm sure they could. The other thing also, just so you're aware, that before those mailers were put into process, when I was designing it and sharing with all of you, I asked, are you changing the location? There's like, well, right now it's still in the library. We're not sure. That, so we don't know. We don't know if we'll be changing it. And then it all hit, and I was.
And you were facing a deadline as well to
Yep.
get these mailers out,
Yep.
because we want to make sure that people had enough time. And just happened to be, unfortunately, after these mailers were sent out, that the registrars decided to change based upon their assessment.
Mhm. Yes.
And then, let's see. As far as the Facebook issue, let's touch base offline, because I actually, you know, in my civilian position, I've got significant contacts over at Facebook security, so I
Awesome.
can see about, you know, about trying to see what we can do about unlocking the account or doing something.
Whatever help you could
Yeah, so
provide.
we'll
would
touch
be
base offline on
immensely
that.
Appreciated. Thank you.
And the last thing is, you know, regarding the firehouse, now, just, I mean, similar to like how Birch Grove was, where we approved the construction with the budget and with the plans as set, correct?
Mhm.
And then, I mean, just like, again, and I see, you know, Ms. Murray still on, and when she and I worked on the Birch Grove project before, that there's a lot of times where you're faced with different change orders throughout the period of construction, and nothing ever actually, I think, goes as fluid, or it goes exactly as planned initially. And so that's what we're sort of facing right now, is that unforeseen issues that really we, you know, could have been anticipated, but weren't at that time, and now we're facing the change, basically a change orders type of situation where we have to adjust to what we're facing now. Is that my
It's
understanding?
similar, yes. We're not in the place of having to put a change order in place just yet.
Right.
We need to get the bids in and see where we're at based on the current economic environment. We did plan for some sort of a contingency in case there were things like this, similar to this happening. But we don't know now with the impact of COVID, things have just gone awry. So
Right, like
we won't
this-
know until we get the bids in.
Like the same thing, like when we were with Birch Grove, when we were facing the steel issue years ago, and there was concern about it going up the price, where we were looking at possible going back for a referendum even to get additional money if we needed to.
Exactly.
And there was one other question I had here, and my notes just slipped, so I'm good, and I'll pass it on to Councilor Jack. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council. But I think I'll also just add to, I think in addition to COVID, I think another concern that a lot of global markets, not trying to delve into personal career, but the food chain industry with the war in Ukraine has really impacted a lot of the global food supply chain. It's probably also impacting where resources are being allocated for military and other humanitarian purposes. But Councilor Yurchak.
Thank you. Sorry if I missed it. So we don't have an estimate of how much these costs?
Not yet. Nope, that's why I didn't have a full story for you, but I wanted to at least let you be aware of what could potentially be coming. This may turn out that the economy is starting to turn around, the supply chains turning around. If we're fortunate enough for that, maybe we won't have to worry about anything, but we just need to see what's happening.
So I guess I'm not here, but sounds like you want to put hold on any discussions with funds that we're talking about with our, like, should we postpone Thursday? And I'm just confused where we.
No, I think we should, if it's totally up to you and Councilor Nuccio, but I think it's still worth meeting and talking about where we're at with certain things. We did have some funds that you were hoping to bring forward to the council, for the full council to talk about and possibly approve. I think we should still focus on what we have. There were a couple more, another request that came in, I think I shared with you, then I could talk to you offline as to how you want to proceed with that for the meeting. So I would not hold, but I don't think I would be, until we get through June, I don't think I would be recommending the use of major amounts of funds unless the council decides that that may not be a resource, and then to keep moving with what you're working on. My thoughts were, that might be a resource for us. Bonding would be a resource, but again, you know, we're doing everything we can not to bond, you know, to try to save on that. And then, you know, if we had to do that, it just, you know, I'd rather see those funds used for something that is going to benefit the entire community and not add a cost burden to the community and still get what needs to be done. That's up to all of you to make the decision.
Check everything out. Make sure you-
Lisa, getting back to the referendum, I get a mail or two. So it's strictly the registrar's decision, that's it?
Yes,
The registrar says, this is what we're doing. Is there any coordination with your office on that, or did
They-
you just say, guess what, we're changing it? That's pretty much what
that's
happened?
how it's always been. Yeah.
Okay, and then does the registrar, does he coordinate, or did he get any information from the health district at all about this? Because we've gotten updates from them in the past. We haven't seen him in a while, but did he coordinate with them?
I know he does, he did speak with Rob Miller. I don't know if that was the final thing that made him make the decision, them, not him, both Len and Mike, to make the decision. But I know he does, they get the input from the various resources before they make a decision.
Okay.
I can find out for sure if you want me to check and see
That's okay.
how he made his decision.
That's okay. And then, so did they ask you, they said, this is what we're doing, how's this gonna affect, what's other things that are happening in town? Did they ask you that at all? No?
Nope, the only thing they said was we could be potentially changing the location, and then they advised me that they were changing the location, and but everything had already been in the works, so.
Yeah, the one thing I'd be curious to, maybe I would be curious to understand how they made that, how they came to that decision, who they talked to, who they coordinated with.
Thank you. I think hearing that, just the conversations in general, I think for future budget years, just to share, that maybe part of the record, you can look back on this next year, is to have some more coordination lead up to our budget vote and set the location. If we can be generic in terms of location, or just have verification and validation from the registrar before we vote to set the budget, and we have that second resolution that indicates the language and where it is, that we get verification from them that that's absolutely where they can go. Obviously, it did change somewhat last minute, and I think on top of it was Good Friday, I think, right when the change was being processed, so there's that lag time as well in terms of town offices operating. But
The problem with that is, you know, you may have, we had the information ahead of time that it was going to be in the library. And you know, unless we just say, that's it, you're not changing it. You know, or
yeah, I think we can be creative, but no, I think it's just trying to have, I think what I'm hearing overall from other counselors is just better communication, better input, maybe some better flexibility, but maybe also in return, having that saying, you know, we have to have this mailer out by a certain deadline, making it clear to everyone that's involved that, you know, you have to know your location by this date so that the mailer can be
I
accurate.
understand that.
So I think that's just the big picture lesson for this year, and for going out to future years. Hopefully at that point we'll be at a much better situation, and we'll have a single location like we have in the past.
I just follow up on John, and saying, I guess everybody here. He's whispering to me. I was asking, why do we vote on a council meeting? I mean, if it just gets overridden, basically.
Well,
That would know, it might be a charter question. I don't have my copy of the charter in hand, but that might be a procedural thing to look at past years, why the vote's that way, but that would be a good.
I know
bigger
the
picture
vote was on
question.
the question. I'm trying to remember now what was in your.
Because I
on the
think, yeah, because in the
pamphlet
packet, I did ask if there were any objections to it being a library program, even if that was decided by the registrars, so.
And it seems like the
Yeah, I
registers
don't have the
fine,
name
say,
handy.
I mean, it's their job, but I mean, they have a little bit more power than the council.
It may also be flexibility due to COVID, that there's executive orders that maybe that their powers are provided by the state with election laws, so it may supersede temporarily what is provided by the charter. Who knows?
I will speak with the the
Okay.
registrars and at least, discuss this with them as well as try to set some goals for next year as to whoever's in this position to help with that. If I'm not here, then at least somebody, they'll have the knowledge to work with that person.
Okay, if we belabored it.
All right, thank you. All right, there's no other questions. Move on to item 11, which is the adoption of the minutes. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes as laid out through as 11.1 through 11.3.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Luba. Is there a second?
Okay.
Second by Councilor Udacek. All those in favor, or any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, so that is all set. Correspondence to council.
There were 2 emails that came in between the 13th and the 26th of March. One was regarding the budget presentation and one was regarding trash.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. So we're on to 13, which is chairperson's report. I think we've belabored it quite a bit. Oh, sorry. You're good?
No, she said March.
Trash.
I apologize.
April
It was
13th.
April 3rd. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I apologize. April.
All right, so chairperson's report. Yeah, again, we probably belabored it, but May 3rd is the referendum. And it's at the recreation center. Obviously, everyone in the room and on Zoom knows about it. But 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Either right and early or whenever it's convenient. The council held an executive session regarding the town manager search last night. We are getting to the finalist stage just for public information. We expect to have the finalists community meet and greets and presentations and interviews by mid-May with either 4 or 5 candidates. We're finalizing some of the information internally between myself, Vice Chair Regan, and Mike Wilkinson. So that is being conducted. And other than that, thanks to everybody who came out this weekend for the Earth Day cleanup. It was very successful. Lots of tires and mufflers off the road and probably hundreds of nip bottles, which I saw that there was that article about the town got, I think, $7,000.
Yeah, I was just gonna
revenue
say,
from that.
we just got it in yesterday, $7,000.
Which I'm gonna save as a question for my communications and petitions.
Wow.
I mean, I know, yeah, just as an aside, I know my father usually cleans at the end of our, our family road, and he's picked like 30 or 40 at the end of kind of a Reed Road, Mount Hill area. Everybody tosses them out, and it's terrible. I mean, I go up in an old staff meeting to do that at some point, but regardless, that's all I have for chairperson report. And the next chair's hour is going to be not next Thursday, but the following Thursday because of our joint meeting. And that would be one other report, is that our joint meeting with the various sports leagues and the Muirfield group is next Thursday. An email went out, at least to the council, will be published to the public at a later date, but that's much updated from the council chambers to the library program room to meet capacity for all the attendees that will be there. And that presentation will be open to be available to the public shortly with recommendations for a potential location. And we'll be taking input and having discussions before moving forward and speaking with interim town manager Lisa Hancock. That will be just discussion. We're not making any decisions that night because we would need to establish MOUs and have our attorney review it, depending on what location is ideal to all parties. So just to share that with the public and the council. And Lisa, you wanna add
I know you
anything?
just said that. I had the agenda sent out today and we accidentally put town council chambers, so it will be fixed.
Yeah.
And that I'm sure is going to be confusion, but hopefully it went out very late this evening. So hopefully we can get it fixed first thing in the morning and get that updated to be in the library program.
Right.
All right. And the 14 communications and petitions from council persons. So my quick question is, what would be the ideal using that $7,000 for in terms of the revenue? I know there was at one point when we established it, there was a discussion about going towards the backhaul, which was now approved through the ARPA funds. So does that then go to planning development or any other organizations that focus on cleanup, or is it educational materials?
There's a number of things under the legislation. Mike Wilkinson and I will be looking at that legislation to try to bring forward what it allows for and to get council input as to how you want it to be used based under what we are only allowed to use it for. So I want to be able to share the different options. We may have some recommendations. And then we will come forward to you. In the meantime, I've set it up and segregated it into a separate fund so that the funds are sitting there until you're ready to move forward with what we're going to do. But I do need time to at least get the information together and then bring you some recommendations. 7,000 isn't going to be a lot right now, but hopefully we'll get close to 21,000 at some point.
Wow.
Because that's the number we were told. It was 22,000 for an annualized basis. So
Yeah, because I think other communities were much larger ones, like the cities and small, like Manchester, even like Manchester, I think they were gonna get enough revenue that they could even hire on like a cleanup coordinator that would go through like recreation or public works or sanitation departments, that they'd be able to, produce some more outreach and efforts to do cleanups and stuff. But that's it for me. I don't know if any other counselors have communications. Councilman Yachek?
How are we doing with an update on the survey for the wells that we talked about a couple months ago? I'm assuming that would be.
wish back over we're still here. No. The Connecticut Water, who performed the analysis and helped with the grant application, there's no way to really do a survey as of yet, and they call it like a communication to get input back from the public. In order to send out the appropriate type of, I'll call it a survey, the appropriate way is you really need to have the cost, the cost of the project, as well as what it would cost the taxpayer based on how much, if you get grant money, if you get a loan, what the net impact would be to the taxpayer. And we don't have that until we find out if we're going to get funding. Now, I received an email today, and I need to clarify it because something came from the state showing the priority projects for 22-23 fiscal year. And I did not see Tolland on that list. I need to find out if that's the grant, same program that we applied for. Because if that's the case, then we're not on a priority list for anything as far as the funding source. So that's the reason why this survey hasn't been done yet, until we can get clear information to share with people. Otherwise, they're not going to want to make a decision. Yes, I'd like to do it. And then they find out it's going to cost you $100,000 now. I'm just throwing
I
it
just
out
want to
there.
make sure we have that before, or we have it as part of a future discussion.
Oh, absolutely. When it gets to a point for you to have to go forward with anything, at that point, we'll have hopefully numbers. But if that communication that I got today is what I think it is, it's sounding like nothing came.
That's quick then, right?
And I could be wrong. I need to speak with
Yeah,
the
sure, of
Department of
course.
Health to see what that is, but
That was just my one question. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Councilman Murray. And then I actually have another question that just came to mind.
I can wait, Steve.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
I go first.
Sure. I had a question. I saw there was an e-blast, a job posting for an administrative secretary in human services. So it sounds like we're down a staff member in human services. Is that right? Okay. Is there anything that we as a council can do to ensure that this position is filled in a way that will provide better continuity of staff? We we know that human services is involved in a lot of things, right? A lot of the stuff we talked about today, including the Firehouse and the recommendation from the mental health task force, a lot of that's coming out of human services. So what can we do as a council to help ensure that the position's filled in a better way to provide continuity of staff? Because I know this this position turned over like in the last 18 months prior. So is there anything we can do?
Councilor Murray, I certainly appreciate your concern, and we may be coming forward to the town council. We're in a similar situation, such as the assessment technician position. We're still working on that. We haven't come forward to you because we are trying to figure out how we can, we've got it advertised. We're going to see what happens. This particular position that you're questioning, we have had significant issues through the years, and it's due to the fact that it's one of the lowest paid positions within the organization, and the amount of work that's involved is intensive, and other towns, other organizations provide better opportunities, and the people leave to make more money and have better benefits. And it's an ongoing problem with that particular position, and maybe a few others, but that's all I could share at this point. And until we figure out where we're going with it, we are advertising it. And I did speak with Beverly Bellady. She's the director of that area, and asked what I could do if she wanted me to bring something forward to town council to address this. And I think what they want to do is to advertise it first, see what we could find, see what happens, and then if there's a necessity to bring it forward for possible changes, we may have to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that information and that update. I had a chance to take a look at the packet that was sent out for the May 5th joint meeting regarding Miracle Field. And in my brief, and I didn't have a chance to read through the whole report in great detail, which I obviously will do, but I did see that in my brief review, there are a number of places where the report says this area would need to be studied further to fully understand its potential. Does that mean the study is not complete?
My impression that
It might be good because the study isn't publicly accessible. That might be.
Well, Lisa mentioned she published it.
Oh, you did publish it. Okay, sorry, my apologies.
I shared it it went out this evening in the packet.
But is it publicly accessible? Is it on the town website? Okay.
It should be.
That's what I want to
And I
clarify.
could double check, but it should.
Because then it would, yeah, I just want to make sure that it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to say anything. I was just asking if the study was complete.
In my opinion, under the impression that I was under, it was complete, and you certainly are raising some very good questions. And I think, some of them I can try to provide the answers to, but also the consultant, the engineer, needs to respond as to why he said, or his group said things like that, where they should have fully investigated it and go from there. I've already got the questions out to him. I don't know if he may have responded, but I'll certainly share them with the entire council once I get them.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, I know this has been delayed a few times, and I wanted to find out if we were going to have any additional information ahead of that meeting, or if there was more information coming.
This was the only.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that information. And I just wanted to put in another pitch about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund review, to request that we get that information maybe with more lead time than we normally get. because of the requests that were made in that joint meeting. There was some legislation we asked for reference and some studies from surrounding towns. And I just wanted to request that we had sufficient time to review all that before we had our next meeting regarding that. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. And then my just quick question, please, that I believe was the deadline for the community fund grant application did the Congressman Courtney's office. I thought I heard that the 25th was when they would say if there's a first round. Hopefully by your facial expression, it's a good sign. But is there any update to that you could share at this time?
I spoke with Congressman Courtney's office this morning. They are going to get back to me hopefully tomorrow. Well, I'm not here tomorrow. I'm on personal day tomorrow, but they know how to reach me, and they're also working with Leslie.
Okay.
They had some additional questions, and we're getting responses to those questions that they had. A lot of the projects that we did request, we're trying to see if we can get them to reconsider because they weren't considered, and maybe one might be considered, but they're trying to get more information from us to see if it would be. So.
Okay, so pending information. Hopefully we'll get word back maybe in a week or so, or if anything.
As soon as I hear something that's definite, I'll share with you.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, I close down my packet. Are there any other communications or petitions? Oh, no, I got it. It's a quick click.
Adjournment. That's it.
No, we still have public participation. If there's anyone in the public, we're on item 15. Any subject within jurisdiction to a 3-minute limit. If you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function or *9. There's no one else in the public except for us, so there's no one that is before us. So
Just one person.
okay, yeah, I see one person from the public. So going once, going twice. All right, M16, Councilor Blue Bite entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:12 p.m.
So
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Khan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Bye.
Unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Good evening.
thanks everyone.